Disney Lorcana's latest set, Winterspell, is almost here, and I don't think it's overselling things to say this might just be the most impactful set since the first chapter. I seriously have never seen so many cards that I think are going to make a mark on the meta. And they're not all high rarity either. There's quite a few uncommons and even a common on the list. But now, before we dive in, I do want to note that we've already covered the legendaries as well as some cards that work well with them in another video. So we won't be doing any repeats. With that said, let's take a look at some of the awesome new cards from Winterspell. I think the best place to start is with something we haven't had in Core Constructed for about 6 months now, and that's a traditional board wipe. Now, in case Disney Lorcana is your first TCG and you're not sure what that means, it's just a card that mass destroys a lot of something, in this case, characters. There are cards in the format that have a similar effect to that, though with some caveats. Under the Sea comes to mind, though it only hits some characters and it puts them at the bottom of your opponent's deck, or Prince Philip Vanquisher of Foes, which destroys all characters that have a damage counter on them. But only one card has ever said banish all characters full stop, and that's Be Prepared. But that's about to change with Raging Storm, an uninkable 8-cost action in Amber. If you're wondering why it's not in Ruby, it's because Ravensburger has refined some of the thought behind what each ink color is capable of doing. And to put it succinctly, Amber is now the color of wide effects like this. There's a whole lot more we could say here, and if you want me to do a video about ink philosophy in the future, just let me know in the comments below. There's not really a lot to say about Raging Storm. It's not as powerful as Be Prepared since it costs 1 ink more and it's not a song. So I doubt it will be as ubiquitous as Be Prep was. But it will see some play, especially if Amber Aggro proves to be as strong as everyone thinks it will be in the new meta. On that same note, if Amber really is the powerhouse everyone thinks it's going to be, the next few cards will be a huge part of that. And we'll start with Bambi, Ethereal Fawn. He is an inkable 4-cost Storyborn hero, Prince Whisper, with 3 strength, 5 willpower, and 1 lore. He's got Boost 2 and the ability Come See. During your turn, whenever this character exerts, reveal a number of cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of cards under him. Put all revealed character cards into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Whew, that was a lot of words. A couple of things I really like about this card. First is the card advantage that we are getting. Now, obviously, this will work best in a character-heavy deck because you don't want to spend the ink to boost Bambi 2 or 3 times and end up whiffing on every card you reveal. The other thing I really like about it is that Bambi's ability triggers when he's exerted. It's not on quest, it's not activated, it's just when he turns sideways, however that happens. So if he's challenging, questing, singing, whatever, that trigger is going to happen. There's also no limit to how many times it can go off in a turn. So if you have a way to ready him, it'll go off again so long as you have a way to exert him. I really like this design space, especially that exert trigger. Hopefully we do see more of this in the future. As for the card, I've tested it a bit in an aggro build and found it's not always useful, but it is nice to have a copy or two there in case the game gets drawn out. And between this and Raging Storm, going past turn 6 doesn't feel like the inevitable loss that it always used to be. The next one is a bit interesting. This is Akud et Emuti. It's a mouthful. An uninkable 3-cost action song that lets you pay 2 ink less for your next character this turn and draw a card. We got to call out the art because it's Angel making a snow angel, which I love that. I think the value of this song is not playing it on turn 2 and accelerating yourself a little bit above and beyond. I think it's actually playing it a little bit later and getting something more expensive out like that Bambi, and then being able to play more things on that same turn. The fact that it's uninkable means I'm not going to want to run a playset of this in my deck, but I think this thing will see some play. I'd feel more comfortable if we had a reliable character that could sing this on turn 2, which we don't really have. Obviously, the way the cards were designed, the underdog angel was meant to sing this song. It's very apropos, but the chances of you actually pulling that off is pretty small because you've got to have both these cards in your deck and then you've got to be going second. So that probably won't go off as often as you might hope. With any luck, maybe in the next set or two, we will get another more reliable one cost Singer 3 and make Akud et Imuti more viable. Another new tool Amber's getting, one that has worked really well for me with testing for my aggro build, is Wisdom of the Willow. This is an uninkable 4-cost action that for the rest of your turn, you get to draw a card whenever one of your character's quests. In my play testing, I've loved seeing this thing in my opening hand because one of aggro's weaknesses has always been running out of gas. This card helps to solve that problem because aggro is going to be full of low-cost characters that you are throwing out onto the board as quickly as you can, hopefully faster than your opponent can answer. But then you hit a wall. Wisdom of the Willow is going to let you get past that by refilling your hand, doing what we're going to do anyway, which is quest. I know playtesting is a lot different than a real-world scenario, but there have been a couple of times when I have had as many as 6 characters on board before I play this thing on turn 4. So picture this. Turn 1 Aurora gets me a free turn 2 Milan, and then a Mowgli on top of that for a little bit of control against my opponent. Turn 3 Lady lets me drop Lilo, and then Lilo lets me drop the new Pudge for free. On turn 4, I play Wisdom of the Willow, quest with everything on my board, and draw 6 cards. Not a bad return for 4 ink. Is it going to happen a lot? Probably not. And that's okay, because even if you draw just 2 or 3 cards, that is still a good ratio that I'm comfortable with. That said, I'm not running a full play set of this because it is uninkable and it's completely dependent on my board state. If I have no characters in play, it's a dead card. I can't even ink it. And so for that reason, like I said, I'm not running a full play set, but I'm also not purposely trying to mulligan for it. If it happens to be there, great. Otherwise, I just proceed with my plan to try to race for that win. This last card is completely crazy. Honestly, I am not convinced it isn't the best Amber card in the set, and there is some stiff competition for that title. And even crazier, this is one of those uncommons that we were talking about. This is Grandmother Willow, Ancient Advisor. She is an uninkable 2-cost Storyborn mentor with 1 strength, 2 willpower, and 1 lore. And none of those stats matter because you're never going to quest with her. And she has such low willpower that if your opponent so much as breathes on her, she's going to get banished. But her ability is so good. It's Smooth the Way. Once during your turn, you pay 1 ink less for the next character you play this turn. There has been some confusion about how this card works, so let's clear that up first. You don't choose when the ability triggers. If you start your turn with Grandmother Willow in play, the reduction will apply to the first character you play. And if you've got multiple copies of Grandmother Willow, that reduction stacks. So if you happen to play a character that is cheaper than the reduction, you're actually wasting resources. But here's the really fun part. That only applies if you start with Grandmother Willow in play. If she comes into play during your turn, then the reduction will apply to the next character you play after that, making it just a little bit cheaper. Or if you're playing a 1-drop like Mulan or like Princess Aurora, it'll come in for free and you don't have to do anything. And it's that ability active when she comes into play that makes her so good. I absolutely love this card. Moving into Amethyst, I'll reiterate what I said during our legendary card review. For the first time in a few sets, Amethyst did not get the most powerful card. And to be honest, it's kind of a relief. But that doesn't mean Amethyst didn't get some cool new toys. And we're going to start by looking at Marshmallow Cranky Climber. This is an uninkable 5-cost Dreamborn ally with 5 strength, 5 willpower, and 2 lore. His ability is Icy Blast. Whenever this character quests, each opponent can't ready more than one of their characters at the start of their next turn. Let me start by saying something controversial. Hades and Demona are the worst couple ever. They make no sense together because they're both trying to do the same thing, but more often than not, they just end up in each other's way. Hades comes in, draws you 2 cards. Demona wants to come in the next turn and draw more cards, but only up to 3. And since Hades has already put more cards into your hand, you're not getting the most out of Demona that you possibly can. That's where Marshmallow comes in. He enters the same turn that Hades would, and he's kind of slow and a little innocuous because he doesn't do anything until he quests. Maybe your opponent thinks he can play around him, but then Demona comes in the next turn, exerts their entire board, and completely ruins their day. The downside to Marshmallow is he's going to be pointless if your opponent doesn't have a strong board presence. So you don't need to run a full playset, especially since he's uninkable. You can probably get away with just 1 or 2 in your deck. And also know that if your opponent is limited to readying just 1 character, it's going to be their best. Have a plan to deal with that. Now, with all that said, I really do like Marshmallow, and I think he will see some play, especially if aggro does become the problem that everyone thinks it's going to be. From one frozen ally to another, let's look at Sven Leaping Reindeer. He is an uninkable 4-cost Dreamborn ally with 2 strength, 3 willpower, and 1 lore. He's also got 3 different keywords: Rush, Challenger +3, and Evasive. I have done some playtesting with Sven, and what a beast, if you'll pardon the expression. Just when your opponent thought their board was safe, down comes Sven and knocks a hole in their defenses. He can take out Elsa, Genie, and Maui on the challenge. That's impressive enough, but he would actually survive against 2 of them. I like Sven more than I like Marshmallow. I think Marshmallow is a little more niche. Still valuable, but Sven has more broad range use. I think Sven is going to see some play. He's just too good not to be included in decks, especially if I'm running Louisa, because he does more for the same cost. Okay, let's take a break from Frozen, and we'll check in with one of the new franchises for Winterspell. This is Colors of the Wind. It's an inkable 4-cost action song where each player reveals the top card of their deck, then lets you draw a card for each different ink type among the revealed cards. I want this thing to be good, and I am sure it will have its uses. A song that draws cards should not be overlooked, especially with the potential to draw as many as 4. But more often than not, you're going to be drawing 2 and sometimes even 1, because if both you and your opponent flip an amethyst card, that's what's going to happen, because it looks at the different ink symbols that are revealed. There is a part of me that wishes this card was 1 ink cheaper. That would put it on par with Junior Woodchuck Guidebook. But that's also being a little greedy and looking at it from the perspective of 1v1. In that sense, colors wouldn't even crack the top 5 for amethyst card draw. There's so many better options. But if you happen to be playing multiplayer, this card's going to be huge. Like, drawing only 1 would be nearly impossible. And drawing 3 or 4 wouldn't require a dual colored miracle. If there's one ink color that kind of got left behind this set, I'd say it's probably Emerald. Both of the legendaries do look fun, but they're very niche and probably won't see a ton of play. And apart from a very good reprint of Strike a Good Match, there's not really a lot to write home about here. But what Emerald lacks in breadth, it makes up for in sheer power. So let's talk about Mulan, Resourceful Recruit. She's an inkable 2-cost Storyborn hero princess with 1 strength, 4 willpower, and 0 lore. Despite that, she does not actually have Reckless, which puts her in rare company. I think there's only 3 other cards that are that have 0 lore value and are not Reckless. Because instead of Reckless, Mulan has Rigorous Training. Whenever this character quests, gain lore equal to her strength to a maximum of 6. So it's probably for the best they put a limit on her, because even with that in place, she's still so good. I mean, do you have any idea how easy it is to improve a character's strength? Emerald can do it without breaking a sweat. Uh, Webby Vanderquack Mystery Enthusiast gives a temporary strength increase when she enters play. There's a brand new Snow Fort, which is an item that gives +1 increase across the board. Speaking of that same kind of Anthem effect, there's also Lumiere Fiery Friend. This would push you into Emerald Ruby, but there's some really good options in there. The Headless Horseman, Terror of Sleepy Hollow, boosting every character on your board with +1 strength every time an opposing character is banished. Ruby Coil, which gives a character +2 strength when you ink a card. There's the brand new song, Force of a Great Typhoon, which only costs 2 and can give Mulan +5 strength, completely maxing her out. I think Mulan's ability is going to be very easy to take advantage of, so she's definitely going to see some play, even outside of that Emerald Ruby shell that I'm looking at. Moving into Ruby, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's start with Goofy, Klutzy Skier. This is an uninkable 3-cost Storyborn hero with 1 strength, 2 willpower, and 2 lore. His ability is, and I apologize in advance for how this goes, it's Yahoo! The way it works is you exert Goofy, banish him, and then you get to banish a chosen character. First off, I love when classic shorts get represented in the game, and this card is taken directly out of Learn to Ski. Second, gotta point out the obvious flaws in that he is both uninkable and a little slow. That said, this is the cheapest unrestricted removal that we have ever seen. Usually when removal costs less than 5, there's a caveat to it. It banishes an evasive character, it's a character with strength 2 or less, a character with strength 5 or more. Being able to hit anything, even if it takes a turn to set up, is incredible. And if there's nothing on the board, he can still quest for 2, which is something that Madame Medusa and Lady Tremaine did not do. I like this card a lot. I've been playtesting it in Ruby Sapphire, and I think it would also find a home in Amber Ruby, especially because Amber has so many ways to bring him back for round 2. Before we move on, I need to make a small confession. I'm kind of a degenerate. I love effects that take lore away from my opponents, largely because I am a bit of a control player, and some of the decks I run move a little slower than my opponents, so I need to rein them in a little bit. It's probably why I love A Pirate's Life, which a lot of people don't. That said, I do feel a little bad about how much I love these next 2 cards. The first one is Scrooge McDuck, Ebenezer Scrooge. He is an uninkable 4-cost Storyborn villain with 4 strength, 3 willpower, and 1 lore. He has 2 abilities. The first is Payment Due. Whenever this character quests, each opponent loses 1 lore. Draw a card for each 1 lore lost this way. The second is Foreclosure. At the end of your turn, if an opponent has 0 lore, you gain 1 lore. Scrooge is a great tool against decks that move too fast. And too slow, actually. Because if your opponent is off to a slow start and you bring in Scrooge on turn 4, you're going to get a lore if they haven't done anything yet. That incidental value is not nothing. But his other ability, where you're removing lore from your opponents and drawing a card, like we've already talked about multiplayer. In a multiplayer game, Scrooge could draw you 2 or 3 cards in a turn, which is fantastic in Ruby, but even just in a 1v1, you're still going to be able to draw that 1 card a turn, which is not nothing, which is pretty nice. Suffice to say, if Scrooge is on the board, your opponent had better deal with it, and sooner rather than later. The other card in a similar vein is Nani's Payback. This is an inkable 4-cost action that reads, each opponent loses lore equal to the damage on chosen character of yours to a maximum of 4 lore, draw a card. So I will point out that the card draw is not tied to your opponent losing lore. If you're hard pressed for something to do, you can still play this thing without a damaged character and you'll get that card. That said, I have been running a few copies of this in the Ruby Sapphire Maui deck I've been testing, and it's kind of mean. Maui can soak up 4 damage before it becomes a problem for him. So you're able to get full value out of this card. The other nice thing is if you're targeting a damaged Maui, you'll gain a lore for playing Nani's Payback because that's what Maui does. The only problem here is that Payback and Scrooge both cost 4 ink, as well as another card we need to talk about. So you're going to have some hard choices to make when you're building with these tools. I will admit that these cards really aren't for everyone, nor are they auto-includes in Ruby. But the strategies that do want them, they're going to love them. I've had some success testing them out, as I said, and I'm intrigued to see what they can do in the real world. I had the opportunity to start playing Lorcana from the very beginning. And I remember when Maui, Hero of All, was an absolute workhorse. His presence has been sorely missed in my Ruby decks, and I'm happy to report that we sort of have a replacement. This is Copper on the Scent. He is an inkable 6-cost Storyborn hero with 8 strength and 5 willpower. He's got Rush and Reckless, so very similar stats to Hero of All. He costs 1 ink more, but you get 2 more strength than Maui had. Also, you lose the deity classification, which really isn't all that important. Not too much else to say about this. Testing it in my Ruby Sapphire build, Copper has been a useful piece of tech. Not running a playset because in that build, the 6 slot is already so crowded. But I like the fact that I've now got an alternative to play instead of Half Shark if I need an immediate answer to something. Again, not a staple, but good to have 2 or 3 of in the right show. Ruby got a lot of toys this set, and we've still got 2 more that I want to highlight. I like both of them. I do think one is slightly better than the other. For me, the lesser of the 2 is Marching Off to Battle. This is an inkable 4-cost action song that draws 2 cards if a character was banished this turn. Card draw in Ruby that's contingent on something Ruby's already going to be doing, which is banishing characters, is pretty spectacular. I mean, we've already talked about some of the ways that we can do that. Headless Horseman. There's also Dragonfire, Maleficent Monstrous Dragon. There's just straight up challenging your opponent's characters. There's also the fact that this is a song. It's not as good as Friends on the Other Side, but it is on par with Colors of the Wind. And since Ruby isn't supposed to draw cards as well as Amethyst, that's a great place for this card to be. The real question you need to ask yourself about this card: are you in Ruby? Are you running removal? Then you should have this card. Speaking of removal in Ruby, there was a lot that was said about having a traditional board wipe in this set, which turned out to be Raging Storm. And while I don't want to take anything away from that card, I think Ruby's removal card is better. There are some conditions, but I still think this is probably the most efficient thing you can do to get stuff off the board. For me, it's the best Ruby card in the set. This is Grab Your Bow. It's an uninkable 5-cost action song that lets you banish up to 2 characters with 2 strength or less. Being able to only take out stuff with 2 strength or less seems like a really bad limitation, but history tells us that it's actually not. If you remember pre-rotation, we had Sisu Empowered Simling, which got rid of all of your opponent's characters that were 2 strength or less. That card was everywhere. I loved it. This is something similar. It's more limited, but at the same time, it's also easier to play. I've done some extensive testing with this thing, and I love it so much because it can deal with Elsa, the Fifth Spirit. It can deal with Genie, Wish Fulfilled. It can even deal with that new Sven that we talked about back with Amethyst. And if you are pairing this with Sapphire and run Sapphire Coil, it can also fairly easily deal with Hades, Infernal Schemer, or Cheshire Cat, Inexplicable, which I both love that card and I hate that card. Love it when I'm playing it, hate when it's played against me. There's Grab Your Bow just gives you lots of options on what to do. So my favorite pairing for this is going to be Headless Horseman because he comes down one turn, he takes out something with 2 strength or less, and then he can sing Grab Your Bow the next turn to take out 2 more targets. And incidentally, give all your characters +2 strength because of his innate ability. The best part about Grab Your Bow, it's uncommon. My only regret about it did not get an epic or enchanted treatment. While Sapphire got what I think is the best card in this set, it's one that we've already talked about. And if you want to know more about that, you should check out our legendary card review. But fortunately, it's not the only card in Sapphire that I like. And a good place to start is with Grammatala, Connected to Nature. She's an uninkable 12 cost Storyborn mentor with 6 strength, 6 willpower, and 2 lore. And while those stats are incredibly bad for what is now the most expensive card in the game, her ability makes up for it. It's Ancestor's Gift. For each card in your inkwell, you pay 1 ink less to play this character. Now, typically cost reduction effects like this have never seen play because they're usually asking for something extra. Items in play or damage on characters. This, on the other hand, is something you're going to be doing anyway, because if you're not inking, you're not winning. And it's something that Sapphire does better than any other color. With that in mind, it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility for Grammatala to come in for, say, 4 ink or 2 ink or even for free. And paying that little for a 6/6 body with 2 lore is a pretty good deal. So I think Grammatala might have a place in a Sapphire build as a solid top end. Something that can come down, resist being removed, and move you closer to victory. I will be honest though, I'm not totally in love with this card and not entirely sure it'll see wide play, but I think it's at least worth taking a second look at, especially if you're only running a single copy, which is all you need to do. Speaking of top end cards that move you closer to victory, Sapphire got another card very similar to Grammatala. And if I was forced to pick one over the other, I think I would go with Tamatoa, Seeker of Shine. This is an inkable 7 cost Storyborn villain Whisper with 6 strength, 6 willpower, and 1 lore. So very similar stats to Grammatala. He has boost 2 and ward, as well as the ability Anything That Glitters. Whenever you put a card under one of your characters or locations, this character gets +1 lore this turn. The one thing Grammatala has over this card is cost, because you should never pay more than 6 ink for Grammatala. If you have 6 cards in your inkwell, her cost will be reduced by that much. Tamatoa, on the other hand, is pricey. He doesn't get cheaper, and he's going to keep costing you. But I do think this card has a place even outside of a build that prioritizes boost, because in that case, you would be paying 2 ink for an extra lore, but there's so much targeted removal in the format right now that Tamatoa's ward more than makes up for it. And anything that tries to remove him by challenge won't survive. I've been playtesting heavily with Tamatoa, running 2 of them in a Ruby Sapphire build, and every time I get him into play, I win that game. Early days, so it's not absolute, but Tamatoa really does some work when he comes in because he's so resistant to removal. I'd also like to point out this is our 3rd Sapphire version of Tamatoa, and I'm a big fan of all 3 of them. This one may not be the most powerful of the bunch, but I do think in the current environment, this is the one that will see the most play. The last Sapphire card I wanted to highlight takes an ability that we've seen individually and applies it across the board. This is Belle, Snowfield Strategist. She is an inkable 4 cost Storyborn hero princess with 2 strength, 3 willpower, and 2 lore. Her ability is Winter Stockpile. Whenever one of your characters is banished, you may put that card from your discard into your inkwell face down and exerted. So a couple of things. First, like I said, we've seen this ability before. Grammatala, Tadashi, even Ichabod Crane, cards that make their way into your inkwell when they're banished. Belle makes sure that anything, including herself, finds second life as ink. I would also like to point out, though it's a very narrow set of circumstances, that Belle's ability takes your banished characters from the discard into the inkwell, meaning anything that cares about that, like the new legendary Anna, is going to trigger off of that. There is a lot to like about this card. As a princess in Sapphire, we do need to mention Cinderella Dream Come True, because Belle will trigger Cindy's ability. But the only thing I don't love about that interaction is because she sits at the same cost as Cinderella, it makes your playlines just a little convoluted. I'm sure better minds than mine will figure this out, so I expect to see Belle cropping up fairly often in the new meta. Last but not least, our final ink color, Steel. We got some very interesting options in this set, and the first one is both absolutely beautiful and completely robbed by the fact that it didn't get an enchanted version. This is Angela, Night Warrior. She is an inkable 3-cost Dreamborn ally gargoyle with 2 strength, 3 willpower, and 1 lore. She has 2 abilities. First is Shadow Power. When you play this character, you may give chosen character challenger +2 and resist +2 until the start of your next turn. Her other ability is Eternal Night. Your gargoyle characters lose the Stone by Day ability. First things first, a gargoyle deck is not really a thing, so I don't expect Eternal Night to be relevant at all. It's her other ability that I'm in love with, though, because during set champs for Whispers in the Well, I had a second place finish with Blue Steel, and one of the cards in that deck, something that I used in multiple games, was Arthur King Victorious. And it wasn't his big body or lore value that mattered, it was his ability Knighted by the King, which gives a chosen character challenger +2 and resist +2, which should sound familiar. This is not a one-to-one comparison because Arthur also gives whoever you pick the ability to challenge ready characters until the end of turn. But the question we need to ask is if that ability is worth an extra 4 ink, and I honestly don't think it is, especially when Angela is inkable. She's not for everyone, but I think there's a lot to be excited for with this card. I'm already dreaming about a Calhoun with 5 strength and resist +3 because I think Arthur might have just gotten dethroned. Next, let's take a look at John Smith Undaunted Protector. He's an uninkable 5-cost Dreamborn hero with 3 strength, 6 willpower, and 2 lore. He has Bodyguard and the ability Do Your Worst. Opponents must choose this character for actions and abilities if able. So at first glance, this card does seem a little bit underwhelming. If your opponent plays targeted removal, John will take the hit. Is that worth 5 ink? Well, when we look below the surface, he's absolutely worth it because he takes everything. Your opponent quests with Basil? Great. They could only choose John for that support trigger. They've got Cheshire Cat in play? Too bad, because Cheshire Cat can only take damage from John. He's going to get removed pretty quickly because your opponents probably don't want to be dealing with that too often, especially if it's protecting the rest of your board state, which is troublesome. But if you can protect him, he's going to shut down some very powerful strategies, even if temporarily, that, personally speaking, have been the bane of my existence. Moving on, we've got another card with some quirky rules about protection. This is Lilo Bundled Up. She's an uninkable 2-cost Dreamborn hero with 1 strength, 2 willpower, and 2 lore. Her ability is Extra Layers. During each opponent's turn, the first time this character would take damage, she takes no damage instead. This card gives me Nala vibes, though Nala gets bonuses if she's not damaged, while Lilo requires your opponent to take multiple shots at her just to get her off the board. She might see play, though the fact that she and Nala are both uninkable 2-drops makes it a little bit difficult to gauge. you shouldn't run both. So some hard choices do need to be made. So one note on her ability, the wording here is take damage. The new version of the comprehensive rules has clarified that means being damaged, so taking damage in a challenge or an ability like, say, Vincenzo Santorini's, as well as damage being put onto her through something like Cheshire Cat or Bell. It's only going to trigger, though, if she actually takes the damage. So if you can give her resist, she's going to be much harder to deal with. Last card on my list, certainly not least, one I'm really excited about. It's Keep the Ancient Ways. This is an inkable 2-cost action song that, when it's played, prevents your opponents from playing actions or items until the start of their next turn. This thing, wow. If you've ever hated playing against Pete, get ready for something even worse, because this thing is 1 ink cheaper, easier to play because it's also a song, and it shuts down both actions and items. In the current meta, items may not be that relevant, but having an easier way to shut down actions is huge. And since it's inkable, I'd expect to see this in almost every steel deck for the foreseeable future, especially if it was already running Pete. Winterspell looks fantastic. And while there's some cards here that clearly weren't designed for constructed, more so for sealed and draft, I think on the whole, this set will have a huge impact on the core constructed meta. But maybe I'm wrong. And if you think I am, why not go down into the comments and let me know why? Or, even better, if you agree with me, let me know which of these cards you are most excited to play with. Then give the video a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our other Lorcana content, like this video right here, where we talk about Winterspell's brand new legendaries. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.